everybody. Welcome back to the On Air podcast, the podcast where recently it seems it's become solely a TMNT podcast. Last time we interviewed the lovely Chuck Patton, the first supervising director on TMNT 2003. Before that, we talked to Roy Burdine, of course, who was Chuck's successor on the show. And today, it seems like we're moving forward in a linear way, in terms of the TMNT world. I'm incredibly honored and esteemed to be joined by the wonderful director of the 2007 Turtles feature film, Kevin Munroe.
Hey, how are you?
Great, thanks for joining me. It's great to talk to you.
It's good to talk to you.
So, I just want to get into this as a Turtles fan. I know you've done a lot of other stuff, and we'll get into that as well. Just take me through it. How did you start off as a filmmaker for people who want to get into the industry, and just tell us about your humble beginnings.
I grew up on the east coast of Canada in a province called New Brunswick. And I was basically always just like the artistic kid in school. But at the time, it was not... animation really wasn't even just filmmaking. It just wasn't in the realm of conversation. It was so exotic almost in a way. And so I thought with my art skills, the best I could do was like t-shirt designs or album covers, I think. And so I ended up going and getting a political science degree instead. And I got into all the political science stuff and I thought I wanted to be a lawyer and the joke is that because I thought I wanted to debate, but it turns out I ended up becoming more of a debater by being a director, I think. But it was just one of those things where like I never kicked the bug of it. And then what initially got me into it is I was in Disney World and they had that old animation tour. Remember the thing with they had like Robin Williams walking people through and saying, like, here's how we make it. But at the same time, it's torture for the animators, I can imagine, who had this like hamster tube going through their studio with all these tourists walking through, like pressed up against the glass. But that was the moment I think where I kind of realized like that the people do this for a living. And so then that led me to Sheridan College. And then I got really super impatient there and only did 1 year and did all of the rest of the exercises for years 2 and 3, I think, just to fill out a portfolio. And I came to LA and just talked my way into studios and started working freelance and just kind of moved up through there. But at the time it was either you went to Cal Arts outside of LA, which they have this whole roster of, I mean, anybody who did anything, in the last 20, 30 years probably went through Cal Arts. Everybody from Brad Bird to everybody at Disney. And that was basically the right. Disney grooming place, basically. And so then in Canada, they had Sheridan College, and Sheridan, they fed into, there was a Canadian studio called Nelvana. They probably still operate now, but their graduates all went there. And it was basically, it was just a boot camp of how to draw in 2D at the time. It was like you couldn't get into the 3D program without having first gone through the 2D program. And so there was something to that the graduates who came out just really understood animation or something, whatever that was. It was much cheaper than Cal Arts, so I'll say that much at the time.
Yeah. I also looked into Cal Arts myself. I was like, listen, if all the Pixar directors went there, maybe there's some sort of networking thing going on there. I don't know. It seems like exactly. Anyone who's somebody went there. Yeah, Butch Hartman went there. A lot of them went there. But in terms of school, like, were you always into animation as a kid? Were you a good art? Like, you said you're an artist, but how so?
I think looking back, I realized I was always trying to tell stories with my art. And so I think for a while I thought maybe for job security, I think at the time it was one of those things where, because as a Canadian, you're very practical and you always have to know where you're going to get paid and how you're going to take care of your family and stuff. And so to me, it was sort of animation at the beginning was just, it's a very viable sort of skill set to have in the industry. And then I think as I went in there and started realizing just how disciplined and good you had to be in order to do it, I think I really just started gravitating more towards just storytelling. And so that was sort of, I had a lot of just rough character designs. I actually found my old portfolio from what would have been 1993 maybe, I think, and the one that I got into Sheridan with, and I mean, oh my god, it's horrible, but at the same time it's like you have to kind of go through it, right? Everyone's got whatever it is, 10,000 bad drawings in them, and you got to get through them to get to the good ones, right? And that's Mark Twain or whatever. Yeah, and so it was. I got to Sheridan, and I loved character design. I really liked the concept of storyboards, but I was really into character design. And then when I first came to LA, obviously you need to get a work visa to work here legally. Which I eventually discovered. And at the time, the PlayStation was just coming out. And so video games were just starting to blow up at that point in terms of, productions, and a lot of new production companies happening. And so I was always a fan on the genesis of this video game, Earthworm Jim. And it was just basically like playing a cartoon. The thing was incredible. And so when I was looking for jobs, they ended up having a job posting looking for a character designer. And they were in this place, Laguna Beach, that was sort of south of LA. And so I went there and ended up getting the job. And then they sponsored me for a visa. And then that's basically how I started getting in there. And I started doing character design for a new project. And then the character design. And it was always just about like kind of anytime there was a new opportunity to do something, it just didn't really, sometimes there was no money in it. Sometimes it was just a chance to do something new. And so a lot of times it was starting we went into the design process, and then I got into character and then story stuff, really, because the company itself, because of Earthworm Jim, they ended up having a cartoon of it at one point. They had a toy line. And so when I came into that whole company, their whole thing was about trying to get things that weren't just a video game, but it was a story as well, which is, it's basic now, but at the time it wasn't as prevalent. And so that was sort of my first exposure to writing and creating worlds and getting into that. And then from there, ended up just reading scripts and meeting writers, and then realizing this is something I really wanted to do. And then I ended up getting into filmmaking, probably through writing, but being a writer who could also draw really well. I made a living for probably the better part of 10 years, I would say, just doing visuals, either doing character design, doing a lot of art directing in video games, doing a lot of storyboards. And then for a good period of time, sort of around the video game stuff, was the time when I just started doing a lot of pilot work in TV animation for like Disney and Warner Brothers and stuff. And pilots in animation, they're not the same as live action, where you cast it and you film it, and it's basically a really sexied up kind of animatic storyboard to audio that you put together. So you put together like a really great animatic. But I ended up, as a result, probably spending 2 or 3 years just going to a studio and then getting a job where they basically said, hey, we optioned the rights to this comic book. We need to make it into a TV series. Can you write up a Bible and give us a design guide for it? 98% of them, I'd probably even say 100% of them didn't even go forward. But it was the better part of 2-3 years, I would say, doing that.
Speaking of that, you worked on Hey Arnold from its inception. Is that right?
That was actually my first job. That was, I ended up, I talked my way into just hanging out in the lobby with my portfolio, hoping that somebody could come and take a look at it. And then this guy came out and flipped through it, and he was like nodding. He thought it, and he was like, cool. And he asked me if I wanted to do prop design. And it was Craig Bartlett who actually who created Hey Arnold. And he was, because it was just that small of a studio at the time. And so he was just the one who just came out and did that. And I think it was episode 3, I think I started on. I can't remember what it was, but yeah, my first, I got it framed here, but my first professional drawing was Eugene spitting in his hand for the baseball game. And so I was basically doing a prop design of him spitting, which was, so there you go. That was
That's hilarious.
My big foray into animation.
Yeah, it says on your IMDb, I don't know how accurate this is, but it says you worked on like some of my favorite episodes, like Veterans Day, Helga on the Couch, Dino Checks Out. I don't know if you remember. This is a long time ago, obviously, but do you remember working on our show?
I do. I mean, and honestly, at that time, it was my first job, and it was solely freelance at the beginning. And I was doing mainly not storyboards. I was mainly doing prop design and then sort of background design or doing like a layout, basically, of like, hey, here's the design of the baseball game or whatever. But we need a shot on, home plate or something. What's the layout for it? So it's like really sort of technical stuff. And so I did that and you get paid per piece. I think if I remember, it was like $300 or something like that for like to draw spit. That wasn't actually that bad, to be honest. I'd still take that job now. So eventually I ended up doing so many of these because I voraciously went at it. Like as soon as I had an opening to like make money just drawing, I went in full bore. So I didn't have. We were living in an Oakwood apartment at the time, which is sort of like these sort of furnished rentals, and I didn't have a light box, so I would take the lamp that was on the end table and I would put it sort of on the floor and I'd take the lampshade off, and then I had a piece of
Mm,
plexiglass that I had bought like at an Ace Hardware or something like that, and then that was basically my light table. And so I would just like work around the clock, and I got to the point that I did so many prop designs that they eventually asked me to go on a weekly rate, which I thought was really cool at the time, but I realized looking back, it was probably saving them money. So, but yeah, that was, and so we probably did cover a fair amount of shows. It was only for like maybe 3, 4, 5 months maybe at the time, but not a lot.
yeah. I noticed a similar trend with TM in 2003 in terms of they transitioned from freelance work to like actually hiring people for a 9 to 5 to do the storyboards. Some of these freelance guys had like day jobs; they would do this at night. So
Yeah.
plus, I guess to save the money, but like $300, that's insane for that. Just like a drawing.
And then sometimes it'd be something really like, and especially the style of, I forget who was the name of the art director on that, who production designed it, but the all of the buildings, you'd like everything's a brownstone in New York, so there was like anytime you'd have to draw a
Right.
back wall, there was like 600 bricks you had to like pencil in at the whole time, and so little things
Oh
like that.
wow. Okay, I
So
see.
sometimes you earned it a
Yeah, yeah,
bit
yeah.
more. The spit was a
Yeah, that
little
show
bit
has
cheap.
like a very cool style to it, like the stoops and the atmosphere and everything. It's very
Super
memorable,
cool, isn't it? Yeah,
super
yeah.
cool.
And you know what I love about that too is that I love that they actually cast real kids doing the voices. I know they weren't the first people to do it,
Mm,
but it wasn't a
right.
really super popular thing at the time, and so it just there was just a level to the believability of everybody speaking to each other that I find super charming. It's a little more prevalent now, but just at the time specifically, it was way cool.
Amazing. And going to Turtles, were you always a fan of Turtles as a kid, or did you like the 2003 series, the '87 show? How did you get into
Yeah.
that?
You know, it's funny because I think I missed being the core toy audience and TV watching audience for Ninja Turtles as just like a kid, right? And so I was probably babysitting by the time that Turtles start when the whenever the Fred Wolf series came out. And so but at the same time, because of that, I was exposed to everything in those first few seasons, and then I enjoyed it. I ended up having an issue one that I found really used. It was really used. And we found that at a flea market that was in New Brunswick at the time, and so it was always sort of there. And then when the movie came out, I loved the live action movie. I remember the time just like it just that it was just so textural, and it was also I think it was the same summer that Batman came out, right? The Tim Burton Batman came out, and so there was just this whole
I
thing
think it
of
was
like
yeah, '89, '90. Right.
just that feeling of just like superhero movies being as real as what they are in your head whenever you were sort of
Mm,
when you're a fan and you're reading something or watching something. And so that always struck me as that, and so I was always around it and I was always a fan. And then whenever I started especially working a lot in animation, TV animation, that's whenever the 2003 series, the 4 Kids series, was coming out, and then I watched every single episode of that. I thought
mm.
that was a great series.
100% agree. Yeah. Did you like
Yeah.
that one better?
I don't know, man. I'm a sucker for Fred Wolf still. I don't know what that is. It's
The
just so
nostalgia.
nostalgic. I don't know how well it plays, but like I would bet if I was going to give somebody like a DVD set, if they were going to go away in a cabin for like, a month, I'd probably give them the 2003 series, just because I think it would be totally fulfilling from a story, just from a fan point of view, just story point of view. Plus, it looked cool. They did so much great stuff with it. It was
They
really
did
like it was a
amazing on that
really
show.
good. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and they took a lot of inspiration from your work as well, and we'll get into this in a second. But so getting signed on to direct TM in
yeah,
2007, what was that like?
yeah. I know. Yeah, that was very circuitous. I sort of come off of this 2, 3 year period of doing all of these pilots for TV animation, like I was saying, and it was a lot of pitching. It was a lot of breaking down stories and being given properties and saying like, here's this IP that we optioned. What kind of a movie would it make or whatever it is, and then you get paid a little bit to come up with a pitch. A lot of times you don't, and so. as I was going through, I started doing a couple of comic book series as well, in that time period, and then I was at Dark Horse Comics where I was doing one of the comic books, and that's when I met one of the guys, one of the main producers from Imaji, Galen Walker. I met him. I met him there. We just sort of crossed paths, and we just kind of just dug each other with small talk conversation. And then a week later, I had heard that they were looking for somebody to come in on another project that they had had. It was called Cattail, basically, and it was a cat that was adopted by a world of dogs and doesn't realize he's a cat. It was very sweet and very straight up.
Like a Tarzan type thing.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was. There was a lot in there. Yeah, and so they were in the middle of. I'm just about to start an animatic, and they were trying to polish a script, and so I ended up meeting with them because they wanted me to do a pass on the script, and then when I was doing that, then because I was been doing animation and sort of visual stuff as well, they asked me to oversee the storyboard for it, and so I got to basically just get there and break down the whole script that I had done a pass on, and we were sitting there working on the storyboards. I had heard rumblings that they were making that they were talking to Mirage about trying to get the rights to a Ninja Turtles movie, and I don't know what it was, but it just lit up inside of me. I was just like, that can work. I loved the idea that it was animation, and I always knew that I wasn't like I'm not a studio guy. Like I'm not the guy who's going to go in and work at Pixar. I'm not the Disney guy, right? So to me, it's always been like, what's that angle of how do you do animation and do it mainstream, but just do it left of center? And at the time, again, this is before Arcane and all the million iterations of animation since then. Something like this came up, and it was just really exciting. And so I started pitching hard at the office to try to get involved in it, and they were looking for a director, and so I kept coming in every day, and while we were working on Cattail, I was also pitching just scenes and ideas, and hey, wouldn't it be cool if, and I think I just bugged them enough that eventually they put my name into the mix, and so I flew out with Galen to meet with Pete and Gary Richardson at Mirage, because Pete was the one who, I think it was since 2003 on, Pete was the one who was majorly in control of the.
For people who don't know, it's so Peter Laird is the creator of
Yes.
TMNT, and then Gary Richardson was the one of the executives for the show at
Yeah.
Four Kids or Mirage or one of them.
He was at Mirage. He's actually the CEO of Mirage. Yeah, so he was sort
CEO
of
of Mirage,
Pete's
right.
right hand guy. Yeah, so he was basically his in-house producer, and Pete was the creator and the almighty Oz, and so he was. So we went out there and I went out, and I had sort of had like an idea, and we were just getting story stuff started. It was sort of up in the air who was going to write it, but we sort of knew kind of the feeling and the direction that Imaji, this new animation studio, was going to be sort of angling after, and so I went there prepared to sort of like pitch and dance through, dance all around the conference room and stuff. And so, but what ended up happening was that we got into this. Mirage offices they were very understated. They were basically just they're not the offices of a studio that has created a $6 billion, sort of franchise. And maybe it's from being in LA too much, and you start, because anytime you go to anybody, like any place in Hollywood, they've got 15 posters around the room reminding you of everything they've done. They've got statues, and and you just go to Mirage's studio, and it was just very chill, laid back kind of. Just, it could have honestly been like they could have sold anything.
This was in New
there.
York?
It could have. No, it was in Northampton, Massachusetts. And so we kind of talked we spoke for a bit, and then we had lunch, and then Pete has collections of different things, and one of the things he had at the time were a whole bunch of these recumbent bikes, the ones that looks like you're sitting like 6 inches off the street, and you're sort of sitting down as you're pedaling. And so he suggested we just bike around Northampton. So there's the four of us that all got into these bikes. Everybody had a helmet on, and it was just like taking a moment to think about and we just biked around Northampton, and we just talked about everything except the movies, like everything except Turtles, actually, right? And so what was cool was we got to the end of it, and then it was sort of it's sort of like that point in the date where you realize, like, okay, cool, we're just gonna like shake hands and say, okay, well, I guess we'll see how it goes, or whatever it was. And so we were kind of like getting our way towards having to leave. And then I brought my issue 1 that I had gotten used way, way, way back. And I thought, worst case, if I don't get the job, I'll at least get it signed, right? And so I asked him to
Get an
sign it.
autograph.
And I get an autograph, right? And so I I've danced this much, I can at least get an autograph. And so he signed it, and I put it back in the envelope, and then we were driving back to the airport, and I opened it up on the way there, and on the inside, because I hadn't looked at it yet, and it said, "Dear Kevin, make a good movie or else." And then he signed it Peter Laird, and he drew an angry Raphael underneath it. And so that's how I found out I got the gig to direct the Ninja Turtle movie. So it was pretty cool.
Wow. What a, like a picturesque, it's like a movie sort of scene, you know. It's very
No, I know. Yeah.
very subtle on Peter's end.
No, I know. It was great. It was great. And so, yeah, and then it was only a short time after we started messing around with the story that they ended up offering if I wanted to write the script as well. And so I ended up writing the script and directing it with Peter.
I've been a fan of Peter for a long time. I religiously follow his development notes that he had for the 2003 series, because that was his baby. So him and Lloyd Goldfine and Chuck Patton, they really, because he never liked the Fred Wolf stuff, as far as I know from what he says. So he wanted to make like the definitive dark, gritty Turtles show. So there's this stuff out there. He has like email logs, and it's public, and it's like all the stories, scripts that he went back and forth with Lloyd Goldfine, who was the producer on the show, and just saying like, change this, Mikey would never say this, Leo's too stern, whatever, Raph is not angry enough, whatever. And that is like super, like as a writer, you read that and it's like super inspiring. So was there a level of pressure for, I mean, I guess that sort of was like a sort of half threat he gave you, you know, with the make a good movie or else, you know. Was there a little pressure on that way?
Yeah, no, yeah. Yeah, there probably was, looking back. I mean, it's like anything. Like, it's, if you actually knew how much pressure there was, you'd never do anything. So you kind of like blissfully. And at the time, I like, it wasn't an arrogance, but it was sort of this blissful ignorance of how impossible things are sometimes. And you're like, well, of course I'm going to do that. And looking back, I'm like, I don't know why I would have given that guy a shot, but it's yeah, it sort of came. I didn't know about because I think he might have even published, I think, some of the back and forths we had on the movie too with it. So I didn't realize it, and I kind of knew it going into it. I knew sort of from some of the discussions from some of the other guys at the office who had dealt with it. It just sounded like he wanted things in a very specific way, and this was sort of, his he sort of had a vision for, I think, how he wanted it to go about. And so yeah, we just got into it, and then we just started just throwing things around, and it's one of those. I don't know. I think I've just worked with a lot of people like that, or collaborated with a lot of people who just sometimes people just have strong opinions, and for the most part, unless they're trying to do the job that you're doing, it's just a collaboration. I didn't know that at the time, right? Like, so at the time, like, there were times when even like notes like that, and it wasn't just Peter, it could be any other project too, but at the time where you would get a note like that and you'd be like, God damn, like, you wanted to take it much more personally than it was intended, which is really, it's just somebody just trying to say like, hey, this is kind of what I like, or this is what I'd like it to feel like. So I've gotten to a point now where I kind of enjoy those people, and I enjoy people having those kind of strong opinions, because it's something to bounce off of, and it's something to build from. It's the people who are like, I don't know, maybe, like, oh, those are the worst, man. Like,
It's
those are,
harder to work
so to
with.
have somebody like
Yeah.
Peter is just like, it was, I don't know, I jive with that personality really well. And it's not because you go yes to everything, but it's so easy to, when you really break it down to what the collaboration is, whenever somebody's like that, nobody's nobody's being opaque about anything. It's the best part of communication.
Yeah, I would be honored by that. You know, just having Peter trust you with his baby, basically. You know, it's not like a small franchise, and I think now it's worth like
Yeah,
billions or whatever. So,
yeah,
but yeah, I want to
yeah.
preface this, like, this movie was the first animated TMNT movie. Like, it wasn't a small thing, and it was 3D CGI, which was also like a new path for them. It wasn't even a 2D animated show, coming off
Yeah.
of TMNT 2003, which wasn't even HD. It was literally 4:3 aspect ratio. It wasn't even
Yeah.
freaking HD. So, that was. Did you guys work on the story together? Or was it only your ideas? Like how did it go there?
No, it was really collaborative. It's funny when you talk about that about the 4x3 2003 because they sent us all the episodes of that series, but the format they sent it in was VHS. Like that was it was just at that
Yeah,
edge
yeah, they
of
screwed up on the
just as
widescreen.
everything. And
Yeah,
it was like I remember I found them in storage. I think it was like 10, 15 years ago, and it was just like God, like it just took up the size of like 8 microwaves or something just to. And now it's just like a little icon on Netflix, which is a lot easier. No, it
yeah,
was super collaborative. It was one of those things. Looking back, it was. I remember Pete was really excited about the CG medium because obviously they had played with it before. There have been a couple of other shows that have been trying to get off the ground, and I don't think anything was at the level of what Imaji was planning on doing with the 2007 one at all because we just had a lot more firepower than I think anybody had. Because I think a lot of the CG stuff they've been playing with before was probably TV based. So I have a feeling most of the stuff that he was looking at was sort of within that scope. And all of a sudden we had turtles who I remember we did muscle tests whenever somebody could flex. And you could see someone's the shoulder striations and Raph's shoulders
hmm
move
hmm
with it, like and stuff like that was. And so to Pete being a detail guy, especially, I think the CG stuff was really super exciting to him. I think in terms of being able to feel the cloth and to feel the texture and the idea of like this is what the shell of a turtle looks like, but this is what the front plate looks like, and it's got a different texture than
right.
and so it's just little bits like that I think that was a really exciting thing. But yeah, to get in, it was and that was the visual development was really fun with him because he was really encouraging to go in a direction that it hadn't gone before. And I look back and I realize like even with the story, it was a lot of that. I think you just come off of I can't speak for him, but I think coming off of 2003 and finally being able to show that entire arc of that comic book and just that lore in animated form. I remember it. There weren't a lot of rules, but it was like, we don't want to do a Shredder story. We don't want to do an origin
Right.
story. We don't want to. But at the same time, all the studio is asking for is for something for people who haven't grown up watching Ninja Turtles. And so how do you do a movie and how do you throw that needle kind of thing? So it was, yeah, it was, he definitely had, his opinions about what it should be. And they were all workable for the most part.
Yeah, and in terms of art style, I mean, I love the look for it. Like the 3D look.
Yeah.
Like my personal favorite art style is the 2003 series, this bulkier thing. But in terms of CGI, I mean, they've never done it as good as this. Like the 2012 show, it's more round heads, or the newer ones with Mutant Mayhem. I mean, they're all great in their own respect. But in terms of just the visual aspect, like the way the turtles look, in terms of just sort of lean, bulky look with like the head shape and everything, I feel like you guys nailed it. And yeah, even the color palette, like that scene with Raph and Leo, just the rain, the atmosphere, it's incredible.
Yeah.
So yeah, you guys nailed it there.
Yeah. The first time I pitched basically what they could look like, I took a Spawn toy that was on my desk at the time, and I just took a bunch of Super Sculpey and I started doing the bigger forearms and the bigger hands and then the sort of the trunked out ankles. But I wanted that amount of I mean, it's a little too much, but it was to get the point across. And that was the first pitch, and I just took a bunch of photos of that model. I've got her under someplace, but it's all cracked and falling apart. But that was sort of the first thing. Whereas I just really, and that was probably coming from a background of character design. I really wanted to get a crack at that, but then after we did that, then we brought in much more talented people, like Jose Lopez and Jeff Matsuda, Tom Perkins. I mean, these guys were just like huge
Mm.
character designers in the industry,
Tom
like
Perkins is
between
incredible.
Batman and yeah, it's Ben 10, like the whole deal. That was sort of the character side of it. And then the whole general production design of it. The whole goal of it was to try to do something that didn't look like everything else, but sort of had like a bit of its own unique feel at the time. And so, but it wasn't about doing photo real at the time because it was, there was like the Final Fantasy CG movie that came out just like a year or two earlier. And that was sort of the forbidden zone that we were like, okay, we just want to make sure that it doesn't go sort of that realistic or trying to be that much. And so a lot of that came down to the talented people at Imaji, and then our production designer Simon Merton, who came in. And Simon, we were blessed with the fact that Simon is a seasoned production designer and art director from live action who had never done anything animated at all before our movie. And so he didn't know the rules. He didn't know how it was supposed to look. He didn't know how. And so what was great was that it was always just about how do we make it look great. And so even though we all sort of knew the rules and we knew things that you should expect and not, Simon would be the guy who would insist that there be some rusting drips coming from a bolt that's coming out of the wall, that there should be dirt in the corner, that nothing should look new. And so it was one of these things that just sort of just eventually just created a style unto itself, and it really was just that collection of people, you know.
Are you personally a bigger fan of the 2D animation or 3D? Like, not just making it, but in terms of, filmmaking in general?
I gotta go with 3D. I think it's probably the control. And I have a deep love of everything 2D animated. But as far as filmmaking goes, to me, the amount of freedom and choice and just lack of boundaries that you have in CG is that's exciting. After we did Ninja Turtles, and then I'd worked on this other feature afterwards called Gatchaman that was based on this Japanese anime that was my favorite anime growing up. Speaking of 2D, that was like a seminal sort of show in my life growing up. And so whenever we were finishing up Turtles, the guy who was in charge of Imaji just asked me, he's like, what would you do next? And it was totally a Cinderella moment, because I thought, what I would do is I would do a Gatchaman film. And then before I knew it, we were doing a Gatchaman movie. It was incredible, and it never came to life. But if you gave somebody, you said you only had $1 million to make a movie, and it has to be CG or 2D, I would go CG, because I think the amount of possibilities you have to make it look more than what it is, to me, that would be the driving factor of that. I think that it's nothing against 2D, but just that's how precise of it. Because I don't have it in me to do a Miyazaki movie. I could maybe write a story for it or something, maybe, but that's so specific, and it's so disciplined and beautiful that it's not in my wheelhouse.
And sticking on the art style thing for a second, the pupils. I gotta talk to you about this, because a lot of 2003 fans talk about the pupils in season 7, Back to the Sewer season, and a lot of people say it was because the toy Playmates wanted to make toys of 2007, which had the pupils, and then they said, why not just make 2003 have the eyeballs as well? So did you?
I didn't know that. That's funny. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Did you guys always want to have or did you want the white eyes?
I wanted both. That was the whole thing. Is I think we went in, and that was, there was a couple of things in there that the only credit we get is just that we were just first to get there, and that's it. Like, it's not like anything was a stroke of genius. It was just they had never done differentiating body types on the four brothers before, for the most part, before what we did. And it's just that's such an obvious thing to me. I don't know, like, it was, but going in and making, like Mikey's eyes wider because he's more prey, and then Raph's are more centered because he's more predator, and just all to me, it was like, if anything can speak to character, then why don't we make it more like that? Even varying the skin tones and stuff. And the pupils were another one to me. It was just for acting, honestly. And I think to watch for an hour and a half without pupils just would have been real. And maybe you could get away with it now, but especially at the time, I don't think, it just didn't feel like it would have been as feasible. But at the same time, that was when we said, it'd be cool is whenever they're doing the action stuff, then we just basically take out the pupils. So we have sort of the whited out eyes. And then at the same time that we were doing that, they were making the Batman Begins movie, and that came out, I think, just like within a year before us. And then that was that shift where it was sort of, hey, here's fighting cape, and then here's standing really cool on the edge of a building with a 30-foot cape flapping in front of me, right? And that's sort of that.
It adds the emphasis to the fight scenes, for sure. Because in 2003, they always have the white eyes, and then you never differentiate. Yeah. But I guess you can pull it off in 2D, but like with 3D, it would kind of look weird for an hour and a half just with the white eyes the whole time. So
it would. I think you'd be like always looking for that connection or something with the character. I think, wanting to see their eyes.
And you also got some great voice actors on board, from James Arnold Taylor to Nolan North. A a lot of great. Even Mako. I mean, freaking Uncle Iroh over here doing Splinter. Like, did you get to work with the voice actors, or were you in the studio for that stuff?
Yeah, I directed them. Yeah, it was fantastic. And what I love, dude, is that you said great actor and you went straight to the voice actors. And I think that's because that to me is that's the core of that whole movie to me is those four guys doing those voices. It's so good to me the that sort of collection of voice talents. And so what was really cool is when we first started, I think we went in and we weren't going to have any basically any marquee talent, sort of like screen talent in it at all. Like the whole idea is I'm a huge fan of voice acting, and I love the community and I love the people that do it. And so anytime I can do something, my default is always we just use voice actors. I'm just a fan. And so yeah, so those guys, we auditioned a lot of people. We had, there's a lot of reads that came in for the Turtles, and then we were looking at what was funny about here's a funny anecdote was the because we had gone through and we had cast everybody as the Ninja Turtles, and so we had James Arnold Taylor as Leonardo, we had Nolan North as Raphael, we had Mitch Whitfield as Donatello, and then we had Mikey Kelly as Michelangelo. But back then, it wasn't as common to stick a bunch of voice actors for a feature in a room together and have them all record at once. And so that was something
Oh, I
that I
see.
was really excited about trying to do. And so we ended up getting the four guys all together in a room, and that's how we recorded all of the Ninja Turtles dialogue for the first two passes for sure. And there was just something to it. There was just an energy in the room that it was just, and those guys were the brothers. We would sit there and every time between takes, they would just start goofing off and they'd start cracking jokes at each other. And then you just couldn't get them to shut up. And I think it drove our casting director a little crazy, I think, because she just couldn't get that. They're just like school kids. It was really great. There's just so much, and that's good. You want that, right? Because you want to have that much energy to sort of come out through the mics. But even the Leo Raph fight was whenever they were yelling at each other. There's something to that. Like when you're going through and recording animation, it's only that whole argument was about escalation. It was always about this guy starting here and then I'm gonna like keep on building it up. And to do that separately is
Yeah,
it's
you
really
can't. It's
challenging.
harder.
And there's something yeah, and there was something cool and imperfect about how it ended up being recorded. And so because whenever you get upset you stammer, you don't say things perfectly. I hate that with voice acting whenever it comes in and people just get these like 10 clean reads of something without really any
Hmm.
context, or and you can hear it, and the second you start hearing it, when you go like that person wasn't given a direction to know what they're responding to, right? And so there's something about having actors in the room playing off each other that you can hear the difference. Bob's Burgers even does it. You can just hear the difference. It just sounds organic and coherent. And so we had recorded on first day, we had recorded that argument between Leo and Raph, and then we had gone through maybe a year and a half, and then towards the end, when Weinstein Company got involved and Warner Brothers, they tried to go back and re-record those parts, and everything that they tried to record, even for the fight, just didn't work as cleanly and as powerfully as that stuff we did on day one. So when we were at the mix stage, we put in the day one recordings that we had, and that's what's in the movie now, is sort of the first day of the guys being together with that argument.
Yeah, I love that fight scene. Like the "I'm better than you," like all that stuff. You can tell they were situated
Yeah.
together, and
Yeah.
yeah, I heard similar stories from Roy Burdine in terms of 2003 series. They also had the four turtles in the studio together, and I don't know why this is like not a common thing anymore. But it sounds like I wanted to be there in that room. You know, it sounds like I'm
Yeah.
totally jealous of you guys. Just that energy and having those guys goof
Yeah.
off and everything. It sounds incredible. And I mean, you can tell in the movie it's a lot more natural, a lot more free flowing. So that's what you
Yeah.
want.
After we left, we'd finished wrapping, we'd finished recording for the day, and we were leaving. And Tom Tanaka, who was my sort of directing partner on it, we were staying there watching all the guys get into the cars. And what was really great, we realized we cast everything great because, like, Leo got into and I'm not going to say what the cars are because I don't even know. I'm not going to remember, but it was this perfect. It was like Leonardo got into like a Porsche, and Raphael got into like an F450 truck that was like 6 feet up in the air, and then Donnie got into a very smart Audi or
Hmm.
VW, right? But it was like a really kind of, and then Mikey had like a hatchback. And it was, and at that moment, like everybody kind of like had like the exact same cars that their characters would have if they actually had that in a
Mm,
series. So anyway, it was a very poetic moment.
that's sick. Yeah, Raph should have come in with the Akira bike, the red bike. That's
No,
that was sick.
exactly.
Yeah. I also knew this film from when I was a kid because I had a PSP, the PlayStation Portable, and this
Mm.
I had your game from 2007 on it. I actually pulled it up here for you. I haven't opened this thing in so long, but
Dude,
I
look at
cracked
that.
it open.
I love that.
Yeah, that's memories right there. So I was playing that last night. I just remembering the fond times. But
Oh,
did
dude.
you work
It's
on
a
the video
fun
game as well?
game too.
It's
No, I
amazing.
didn't
Yeah.
really work on it. We worked closely with them because that was Ubisoft, right? That was and I know we work closely with them on an asset level and sharing a lot of things like the animation cycles and stuff like that, and the environments. And I think the guys went in and did a whole, they actually got the four guys to go and do voice records for it as well, so that's super cohesive too. And so it was really fun because for about a year before it came out, they gave me an Xbox dev kit, and I had one in my house, and they would send updates like maybe every month, maybe every 2 months. And it was just, sometimes it was just them running up. It was Leo in the jungle running along the walls, I think, like for the longest time. And it was just them. It was what, Prince of Persia? Was that like that sort of that game mechanic of like running sort of along the walls and stuff? And so they just kind of ported that in there. But that was a fun game, man. And those are like really good memories of just seeing that thing come to life. It was like a bonus production in the movie.
Very nostalgic. So you didn't have any involvement in
Yeah.
that in terms of story or script or anything.
No, 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 no. They just sort of
Okay.
ran with that one themselves. Yeah.
And I always ask this: favorite turtle.
My favorite turtle. I'm such a dad when it comes to it because I can never say who my favorite turtle is because I feel like I put so, it was really funny. I'll give you an answer at the end, I promise. But the what's really funny is to me, like the turtle script to me was the first script where I think there was like a light bulb moment, even though I've been writing for a few years before that, where I was under the gun for a deadline to just, all of a sudden there was just, it's this massive pressure to actually write a script whenever people are waiting for it, as opposed to writing a script and hoping you'll sell it one day. And all of a sudden when you have like people going like, hey, listen, we started 10 modelers last week. What are the characters doing in it, right? So it was one of those things where I was trying to figure out how I was trying to get into it, and how do I put out something that follows all these characters. And so it was really the first time that I think I'd really sort of taken an empathetic view of writing characters, where I really sort of tried to see each character through their point of view as I was writing. It's really super simple writing advice, like everybody would tell you to do it, but I specifically remember TMNT was the time when I was like, what do I do with this scene? Oh, well, easy. Like, what would Mikey say? I just got to think about like Mikey. And as soon as I think like Mikey, I'll know what I would say in that moment, or like Donnie. And so as a result, to me, the four of them just sort of like, I see myself, or I see little bits of them in everything. I think ultimately my favorite is, oh, I should, who's my favorite? I'm gonna say Leo. I'm just gonna say Leo. I'm gonna say Leo
Okay.
because I want to say Raph, because you want to say Raph because it's a little more badass, it's a little cooler, and I
Yeah.
probably have a
Yeah.
lot
That's
more in common with Raph in terms of all of like hothead and quick to judgment and everything else. And I'm hesitant to say that I like the guy that you're supposed to like, who's the leader in the Boy Scout. But there's something about that character Leonardo to me, not because he's like a leader of any type, but I love the things that people don't realize that he has to grapple with being the guy in his position. I love older siblings. I love the weight of that stuff on you, like within the family. That stuff's interesting, and it's way too easy to like, it's how do you make that sort of the the quarterback superstar, how do you make him a sympathetic character? And it's like, you just don't realize really what that guy has on his shoulders, maybe. And that to me has always sort of been that secret to Leonardo. And so I think that was sort of the thing that I think really trying to crack that in this movie was just like, yeah, if he was that guy, like what's the next step for that guy, and what is he trying to hold together, and what are the things that people just don't question, that he's dealing with on a daily basis.
Yeah, I've always said Raphael because got to maintain the street cred and everything. It might just be the Scorpio in me is just like always angry, but no, I guess
I'm a
as you grow
Scorpio too.
older,
I'm a Scorpio too.
hell yeah.
Maybe that's a Raphael thing.
Like yeah, but like once you grow up, you realize slowly as you become more mature. I feel like Leonardo comes out more. He's always the most fleshed out character usually in most of the iterations also because he's the leader and everything. But I just love Raph. You can't hate Raph.
No, I
He's
know.
awesome.
I do. I think honestly, not to turn this into a therapy session, but I do think that fight between them is like I can hear those two voices in my head. I think that's
Oh,
why it was
absolutely.
so easy to write that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like when you're trying to do the right thing, but you're kind of like a jerk for doing the right thing to somebody,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know. And then the other side being so justified and being just I don't know, whatever that is. But to me, it's yeah, it's a very emotional, heartfelt scene for me. I really like that one.
Yeah, you see it a lot. A lot of the Raph and Leo thing is like as old as TMNT itself. I mean, there's so many
Yeah,
2003 episodes from that. The 2012 show has that. I mean, it's
yeah,
and it makes sense because these characters are literally like the antithesis when they reach their boiling point. And whether it's like
yeah,
Leonardo wanting to help others when Raph says it's not our fight, or if Raph is being a hothead, Leo's there to calm him down, but being a little bit of a goody two shoes a little bit, so it gets on his under
yeah,
Raph's skin. So like as a from as a writer point of view, it's like very you see why they don't get along as opposed to the other two turtles.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, did you guys ever plan on having sequels to this film, or I know Nickelodeon bought it out after a few years, but
Yeah.
was that always on the radar?
Yeah, I mean, I had a deal to write Turtles 2. So, and it came out, and we were planning. We had nothing more than a story pitch, and it didn't really leave. It was mostly just Tom Tanaka and myself just kicking around ideas. We did even when I was there, we didn't even commit any artwork to it. And then somewhere along the release of Ninja Turtles, I think because things got really sticky with Weinstein Company and Warner Brothers, more Weinstein Company, obviously, but that I think the company, the studio Imagi, I can't speak for them, but I think the idea of going into another Turtles movie right away was you just realized how you had to diversify. I think a little bit away from that partnership, and so I think that's what moved up Gatchaman. I think in the priority, and so we started doing Gatchaman. We had a meeting with Warner Brothers. Uh, Jeff Robinoff, who was the one of the heads of Warner Brothers at the time, he bought it in the room when we were there. It was just this, and so Turtles 2 ended up becoming sort of this. Hey, we're going to get to it, and then eventually we started getting fully into Gatchaman. But yeah, we came up with it. We were always planning for TMNT to go on for two more movies. Not that it was like a big master plan, but that was sort of like, I bet you we could do a really nice 3 episode arc with this. And so we sort of had plans for what we'd go into for the second one and the third as well. I wanted to do CG's
Right.
Triceratons. That was my
Oh,
ultimate
that was.
goal.
I was gonna ask,
I,
like, what was the story behind it?
that
Can
was
you
the third.
tell?
No, it was there were a smattering. I think honestly, online it's become a lot more concrete than it was in reality. But it was basically the loose premise was we wanted to do a a story centered around Mikey and how Mikey's always the one that because and it was probably us responding to the fact that the Leo Raff thing it was so strong in the first movie that it was like it'd be really great. Let's see if we can give that much love to Mikey beyond being really a dynamic player, but like to really make him a central focus. And in that same way, probably thinking about, Leonardo and Raph, thinking about them empathetically, the idea of like thinking about Mikey the same way. And like, it just, what are the things that poor guy has to deal with. Right. And maybe it's just never getting that seat at the table. Maybe it's never. And so it was this whole thought was that Mikey was going to become sort of dissatisfied with his place within the team. There was going to be this incident that was going to happen that was going to basically make him want to leave the Turtles, and he was going to basically ditch and go over to Japan to find himself or something, whatever that was. And so he ends up meeting up with members and gets entangled with the Foot Clan, but from their point of view. And then there was all going to culminate with Karai coming over there because we were planting. That's why she was planted as a seed in the first one. And then there was going to be a moment where Donnie dons his, or Mikey puts on his black bandana to join the Foot. And then they come back to New York because we were setting up the whole city at war. The whole city at war storyline, basically. So that was sort of it was going to be, and Pete was okay with it because it was sort of messing with, it was our version of City at War. So it wasn't going to be, it's sort of undoing any canon, because the movie always kind of like is always sat in this weird spot of, where is it officially in the timeline, or is it not, or is it whatever? And so it would have been, that definitely would have been a step in sort of establishing its own sort of timeline, or at least spin-off, I guess.
That's amazing, because usually that sort of plot would be for like Leonardo, going off on like a pilgrimage, or even teaming up with Urokusaki or the ninja, foot ninja, or whatever. So, but from Mikey, that would be so cool, because you see the like silly turtle be like mature and go through like a whole arc. Like that would have been, I wish we got to see that.
And I always thought about like that storyline, and to me, like the vision is like is this little kid who's like 5 or 6, whose face is like stained with tears, and they're standing at the end of the driveway with their little like Hello Kitty suitcase packed up, and they're like, I'm leaving, and like, but you take that feeling and you put it, what would actually drive you to that as somebody who is in their late teens to go like, what, this is not the place for me right now. And you just treat it seriously. And then, you basically you give it legitimacy of Mikey being able to be a 3-dimensional character. So, that never obviously got off the ground, but we do have.
Why can't they give Michael Bay's money to you guys? It's not fair.
Yeah, we could have done 8 movies with that. And then the third one was going to be, we were going to bring Triceratons in the third one. And, Technodrome was going to be, it's the same thing with Planet Hulk, right? Like how everybody wants to see Planet Hulk. It's the same thing with, the Technodrome. I just wanted to see the Technodrome in 3. That by the time we would have hit that would have been amazing, but oh well. But we got Last Ronin as a comic book series, so you sort of,
that's all that matters. Yeah, the fans got sort of a little bit.
Yeah, somebody got a little taste of that sequel somehow in a very bizarre parallel world.
Yeah. Speaking of the other movies, though, have you seen like Turtles Forever, Batman versus TMNT, the new one with Seth Rogen, Mutant Mayhem? Like, have you caught up with all these?
Yeah, I mean, most of them I've seen. I have not exhaustively watched the 2 new, the Rise and the like the 2012 series, but what I've seen of them, and all of Sierra's work is insanely good. I love the spirit of it. Yeah, no, I see them all. I like, it's even like, it's one of, I always say it, but it's like you could tell a turtle story with sock puppets and it would still work, because it's not about who does it. Well, it is about who does, I guess, but it's not about how it looks. It's not about any expectations beyond a tone. And if you can achieve that tone, it works.
Yeah, I think, I don't know who it was. I think it was like Bob Scanaway made this Teenage Mecha Ninja Turtles. It's just literally like 4 robots, like Big Hero 6 robots that are just colored like red, blue, purple, and orange. And it's just like you can do anything with this brand, apparently. It's like, you don't even need turtles. Yeah.
Exactly. No, and I love the Mutant Mayhem stuff. I think it's really fun. I think the movie was a boatload of fun. It was really cool. And I specifically, I like the voice performances in it. Were just,
that one also has the kids, like you said earlier.
Yeah, it totally works. And the new series, I only watched 1 episode on the weekend, but the new one on the series on Netflix that just came out was really fun. At least the pilot episode of that, the Mutant Mayhem series.
Does look good. Have you seen Batman vs. TMNT though? It was like a TV movie a few years ago.
Yeah, I did. Yeah,
that one's amazing. Yeah. I wish that one got like a feature release, because it was very ambitious, and they did a great job with it, with just combining like the Batman world with Ninja Turtles, and
it's amazing, isn't it?
It's incredible.
Yeah.
So we talked about directing live action with Dylan Dog, and doing animation with with TMNT and other stuff, I've heard some directors say it's impossible to do both mediums. Like, in my opinion, there are exceptions like Brad Bird or Bob Zemeckis, like, you know, with that sort of stuff. But do you feel like you have to be sticking to one medium, either all animation, all live action, or can you as a director be flexible?
I think you can be flexible. I think you can have a preference of the medium that you like and that you're most comfortable in. But I think it's a pat saying, but it does come down to story. I think as long as something's compelling and makes you want to see it, I think it doesn't really matter what it is. I think I would do another live action movie. Having gone through one now, which was a learning experience, and it was a lot of fun. At the same time, the amount of things that overlap that are the same hassles in both medium, it all comes down to story and resources and time, like whatever it is. It's always just, it's lighting. It's even in CG. It's like, hey, we have too many lights in here, or we have too many unique lighting setups in CG. So we need to have more global lighting. And you're like, oh, if you make a global lighting, there's this thing where if you just put on 3 lights in the room and then you know this because you're obviously I'm looking into it. But if you just stick a camera anywhere and make sure it's globally lit like a supermarket, it looks great in terms of the fact that everything is well lit, but there's no story to the shot. There's no balance. There's no anything like that. And so as a result, to me, it doesn't matter if it's CG or if it's live action. Lighting will kill you every time.
Just to finish up here, a lot of people watching this are, you know, animation fans, are into filmmakers. What advice do you have to directors out there trying to get a start?
My advice would be I think it's probably more related to that idea that I'd said before, where it's like if you're trying to learn to draw, you got to get through your 10,000 bad drawings before you start drawing your good ones. And so I think the same as a director, it's the same thing. It's like you got to just jump in and do it. There's something that's out there because of either it's either the way it's presented that just some people have like this perfect plan and it works out and they sell their first story and then they're making their movie, or they get like, and it's not, you just got to get up and keep on doing it. You got to just make a bunch of bad movies so you can make the good ones. Right. And I think especially now, I think so practical advice, if you're looking to get into it, just start telling stories visually. I think there's a lot of people that you can write a good story, you can shoot a good picture, but the idea of putting them together and then pacing them out editorially, and how do you create suspense? How do you create it funnier just by taking off 16 frames, or how do you make it more dramatic by adding 30, right? All of those things. And I say those 3 things specifically because you can always get more money for budget. You can always get better, collaborators or better talent, better acting talent. But the idea of, can you put together a story visually? Can you tell a story on screen and just press play and have it convey what you want to get across? That is probably the biggest skill set to me that I know I've been trying to to develop over the years.
That's amazing. I appreciate that. And just to finish off, just if you want to plug anything, what are you working on for the future? What's coming up in your world?
Yeah, I can't actually talk about what I'm working on now, but I just wrapped on a CG film that we are going out right now to find distribution for in this incredibly exciting market of where do films go these days. But yeah, no, so I just finished writing and directing the CG feature, and it's a family film, 4-quadrant, really super fun comedy action adventure thing, and I just can't wait to share it, but I can't for now. But otherwise, awesome. Going into this year, and just starting to work on a couple of new projects. And I wish I could talk about more stuff, but I can't.
Yeah, when it comes out, we'll put it in the description. So if people are watching this in like a year, it'll probably be there. And I'll make sure to leave Kevin's, social media and everything, so guys can go follow him. I think he's on Instagram and
that's it.
All over the that's it. Awesome. Yeah. You can follow his Instagram if you're gonna do one thing today. Perfect.
Just put my cell phone up. Just tell people to give me a call.
Yeah, and I will put your PO box there for people. Awesome. So thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much.